So we are here with
Brian Ross of Blitzkrieg in sight.
and we are talking all Blitzkrieg.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how did Blitzkrieg begin?
Well, at the time, I was living in a town in England called Leicester. I'd moved there with the band that I was in at the time. We'd had a huge disagreement about the direction that the band should take. The band that I was in at the time was kind of, best way to describe it was, if you imagine a Bad Company free type of band, like a bluesy thing. And I could see that bands were starting to go heavier. The punk rock thing was huge in England at the time. Kids were picking up instruments and making an awful lot of noise, trying to get noticed, playing a lot heavier things than had gone before. And so we totally disagreed on that. They wanted to stick with the blues thing, and so basically they fired me. So I was sat in Leicester without a band, looking for a band, and at the time I was working for a company that did renovation on old houses, like townhouses and so on. I was an electrician by trade, so I was there rewiring the houses and so on. And at lunchtime, I went down to the local cafe, walked past a recording studio, and there was an advert in the window. Heavy band requires singer, must be into Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, and I thought, sounds like the band for me. So I took the telephone number down and phoned them, and I spoke to Ian Jones, and the band in question was a band called Split Image. And I went along to a rehearsal with them. I was impressed with what I heard, they were impressed with what they heard, and we agreed that we would collectively form a band. And the first thing I said was, the name has got to go. Split Image is not a great, it's not a great name. I didn't think it was a great name. And I said, look, we need something that is much more poignant, eye-catching, more rememberable, really. And so we'd actually played several gigs as Split Image while we're trying to think of a new name. Nobody in the band could come up with anything. We had various different suggestions. And the manager that we had at the time came into rehearsal one night and said, I've got your name. So we all need to sit down, have a cup of coffee, because I need you to be sitting down when I tell you what this is. So I thought, yeah, okay, fair enough. We sat down, had our coffee, so we said, all right, what is the name? And he said, Blitzkrieg. There was silence. And Jim Sirotto, also guitar player, he said, what the hell is Blitzkrieg? and I said something like, Jim, you really don't want to know. However, Jez wouldn't be put off, and he said, think about it, guys, think about it. It's immediately sparked a reaction with you guys. So there, it's ticked one of the boxes already. And then we kind of looked into it, and obviously, in England it means something, and across Europe it means something that's really quite sinister. It was the name given to the German invasion of the rest of the countries in Europe. We thought, really, but then we started thinking, well, what is the actual, what does it mean? How does it translate from German into English? What does it actually mean? Well, Blitzen is lightning. Krieg is war. So it's lightning war. And we thought, that doesn't sound quite so bad when you think about that. It's also used in German to express, as in English, we have different, yourself, you'll know. You'll have different phrases that mean things. Sometimes it's not always the literal meaning,
correct,
but it's attached to something else. And in German, Blitzkrieg is also something, we'll say, oh, it was a Blitzkrieg. I believe you use it in American football, is a fast attack. And that's exactly what it means. We all sort of took that and said, okay, for a fast attack, we can go with this, because that actually described the band as we were at the time. we've played everything at 100 miles an hour. It was like a very fast attack, and we thought, yeah, okay. So we thought, yeah, we'll go with this, and that is how the name came about. And similarly with Satan, we did have a few problems at first, but people kind of warmed to it and got used to it. And we were kind of worried in case it really did offend people. But I think after the initial burst of, whoa, you can't be called that, I think people, once they accepted it, and the German people who we thought might have been really offended by it, actually haven't been at all, because they took it for what we intended it to be. And it's something that I'm really pleased that we did now, that we went with that. We're not Nazis, we're not, we don't believe in annihilation of all lesser races and all that kind of rubbish. Similarly, like, we said before with Satan, we're not Satanists. It's a means to an end, it's a name. And a very good name, I believe, for a heavy metal band.
Okay. So let's go through the recording history.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a bunch of records here available to us.
Okay.
Right?
Well, we'll start with A Time of Changes.
Yes.
A Time of Changes came about really after Satan went our separate ways. And for a short while, I was the manager of a local band in Newcastle. I got them into the studio and we recorded a single. The band was Lone Wolf, and the singer wasn't up to it. We got into the studio. He couldn't handle it. He had real problems in the studio, and it was taking so long to try and get any vocal down at all. In the end, the guys said to me, "Look, you're the manager. Do something about it. You've got to fire the guy." And I said, if I fire the guy, we don't have a singer at all. So the decision was made, yeah, we fired the guy and I did the vocals on the single. Taking it from there. But moving on to this, these are a collection of songs that after Satan, and while I was doing the Lone Wolf thing, I think what you've got to understand, when Blitzkrieg split up in 1981, we had no idea what an impact we had made. We had no idea at all. We'd been offered a record deal by Saxon's label, Carrera Records, and because the guitar player Jim Serrato didn't want to do it, he thought about it long and hard and decided he didn't want to do it. I decided I didn't want to do it without Jim, so we turned down the record deal. We turned down the European tour with Saxon, and the band split up. But we'd written enough songs for an album, and people had kind of picked up on that, and they'd heard through the grapevine that there were what they were calling was the Lost Blitzkrieg album, really. And so I went into the studio to record what was going to be a Brian Ross solo album. And the title of the album was going to be Blitzkrieg, A Time of Changes. And Neat Records released a press release about the album, and the press picked it up and said, Blitzkrieg have reformed, they're doing a new album. And I kind of thought, well, if this is what people really want,
why not?
Why not? Go for it. So when we actually recorded this album, there wasn't really a band at all. I got Mick Moore on bass from Blitzkrieg, the original lineup of Blitzkrieg, and Jim Serrato there. But I got Sean from Satan to play on drums, and we got a guitar player in who went on to play with the Spear of Destiny and so on. It wasn't really a band. And I thought, okay, I'll do this album. It's kind of like dipping your toe in the water to see how it goes. And I thought, if it doesn't go anywhere, I've lost nothing. If it does, I've gained an awful lot.
And you did?
And I did, yeah. We put out the album, and immediately it was people were loving it, and it was like, this is the Lost Blitzkrieg album. This is the album that should have come out. This is, So, and to be honest, the songs were too good to just let go.
True.
I felt that we needed to do this, and I stayed as true to the original concept idea that we had from 1981 of what the album was going to look like when we did it. Even the title, we'd already decided that the album was actually going to be called A Time of Changes. We wanted the idea of a bird bursting out of a grave whether it's hell, you don't know. But looking down into the grave, as you do from this angle, you can see inside of the grave is flame, all of the red, and there's other Blitzkrieg birds flying around that haven't come up out of the grave. They're still there. And the pages of the book have turned over to show the different people in the band. So, you know, I kind of tried to stay as true to that original idea as possible. I put that out in 1985-86. Also the year, while I was actually recording this, I got home and my wife said, oh, there's some guy been on the phone. He wants to know, can he do a cover version of Blitzkrieg? And I goes, yeah, who is it? And he goes, Lars Ulrich from Metallica. And I went, yeah, right, okay, whatever. She said, oh, he's phoned, whoever it was, he's going to phone back again later. So I thought, all right, fair enough. And, you know, so I was having a cup of coffee, and it was about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and the phone rang. And he said, hi, this is Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it wasn't what you might expect. I went something like, yeah, right, okay, whatever, you know. And he said, no, seriously, I am. And you know, he said, look, we'd really like to do a cover of Blitzkrieg. I already knew that Metallica were huge Blitzkrieg fans in the first place anyway, because a couple of years before that, Lars had sent me a copy of the No Life Till Leather demo. And on pretty much everybody else's copy, it's only on one side. On my copy, he put a live gig of Metallica from San Francisco on the other side, in which they played Inferno, Blitzkrieg and Armageddon, 3 Blitzkrieg songs. And so I was aware that they used to do them. So when he said, look, you know, we'd really like to do Blitzkrieg, we're doing this thing where we're sort of looking back on our history and bands that have influenced us and so on. So I said, yeah, of course, whatever, you know. And I spent a couple of hours on the phone to him, dictating the lyrics to him so that he could write them down and telling him what the exact chord progressions were and so on. They still got it wrong on the record, but it doesn't matter. The point is they did a version of it that is really, really quite good. And it's Metallica. It breathes, it eats, it sleeps, it Metallica, you know. And I think if you're going to do a cover version of a song, that's probably the best way to do it. You've either got to do an exact copy, or you've got to put your own stamp on it. And I think Metallica put their own stamp on it.
They certainly did.
They did, and it's great. And you know, people, that is probably one of the most common questions I'm asked. What do you think of Metallica's cover version of Blitzkrieg? Well, there you have it. That's the answer, really. It's great.
I'm glad I didn't ask it. You got it on yourself.
I put it on there. But yeah, so that happened concurrently with the recording of this album. And we put that out and then sort of went from there. A few years later, well, more than a few years later really, there was a Time of Changes Phase 1, which was a reissue of this, but it also had extra tracks on it from rehearsals and so on. It's something that kind of, you know, Blitzkrieg fans have been asking about, of sort of like, you know, what was it like back in the day? Where can we get different Blitzkrieg materials? So there's the stuff on there from the Lead Weight compilation. There's the stuff from the live tape that we put out. This album, of course. Then you know, all the other stuff from. There's a couple of live tracks on there. It's basically a sort of a bring it up to date kind of thing. Because people wanted more material, so we did that. And I thought, yeah, okay.
And speaking of newer material, there were records that followed.
Yes, there was. And, you know, I kind of wanted to carry on the tradition of Blitzkrieg, because by this time I was the only remaining member left. That's not because they're all, you know, I mean, Ian Jones has since died, God rest his soul, you know, it was something that hit me quite hard. Because that was the first time that I'd lost anybody from any of the lineups of any bands that I'd ever been in. And Ian, at Ian's funeral, he had Blitzkrieg played, and that meant a lot to me. And you know, we all thought a lot of Ian, but So I wanted to keep anything that I did in the sort of tradition of, if you like. And I got a guitar player from the Northeast, Tony Little, Tony J. Little, and he is probably one of the best writers that I've ever seen. The guy, he just comes up with ideas and it just works. You know, I could give him a set of lyrics and say, can you write a song with this particular feel to it? And he would come back a few weeks later and say, there you go. You know. So we did this, and I kind of, this is about the well, Unholy Trinity is the title given to one theory of who Jack the Ripper actually was. And I spent a lot of time researching it so that I could say with confidence the person that I name as Jack the Ripper on this album was Jack the Ripper. I wanted to do that. So, and there was 3 people involved, that's why it's an Unholy Trinity. And so, you know, but the rest of the album, it's not a concept album, it was just, that's the way it went. And that is probably most fans' favourite album. Over the years, it's kind of, they've come up to me and said, oh, Unholy Trinity is an amazing album. And that's great. It's an important album in Blitzkrieg's history. And I think it's got some really strong material on there. So, yeah, that's Unholy Trinity, yeah.
Keep going.
The next album, or, well, this one, we're not sure. I was never sure. This is a continuation of an album we did earlier. We did 10 Years of Blitzkrieg, which is this, or some of this. And what we did was, we did 10 Years of Blitzkrieg, and we did side 1981 and side 1991. And so we re-recorded Blitzkrieg and Buried Alive. And we put new songs on the other side. This was the same thing, but we extended it to be a full album. So it's got those tracks on from 10 Years of Blitzkrieg, but it also has the extra stuff on that was never put out at the time. So that links those two together. We just simply shortened the title to 10 rather than 10 Years of Blitzkrieg, because it wasn't an anniversary album by that point. But it has 10 songs on it, so that is the reason for 10. And it's got some interesting stuff on there, really. Now looking back on it, I think we probably did Buried Alive and Blitzkrieg a little bit too quick. They were a bit fast. Difficult to actually put the lyric in, to be fair. We also did an updated version of Blitzkrieg called Blitzkrieg 86, which went on there. Different lyrics to the original. This one, The Mists of Avalon, again is taken from the title of a story, but this is a sort of a concept album. It's based around the Marion Bradley book of the same name, The Mists of Avalon. It's about the Arthurian legends based in England, really. And I personally, some people are going to be scratching their heads and saying, oh, he's lost it, he's insane, he's gone. But I personally believe that Arthur wasn't real. Whether the stories of Camelot are real, I don't know. I'd like to think that they are. But around the time of the Roman invasion of England, the country was in disarray, and obviously a hero was needed, and Arthur provided that heroic, whatever it was, the age of chivalry, if you like. And there's no doubt about that. That was where the age of chivalry came from, with knights and so on. But what we have here is a concept album based around that idea of what Arthur was about, what Avalon was about, Excalibur, Merlin, all of that stuff is in there. The rest of the album is songs that I'm reluctant to say fill up the album, because that seems to suggest that they're not great songs. That is far from it. But we needed obviously to fill up the rest of the album, and I wanted material that was just as strong as the Arthurian legend without it being anything to do with it. And at the time, we had lost Princess Diana and the Princess of Wales, and I wrote my personal tribute to her, which is on this album. And people took that, and fortunately they liked what we did. However, my concern about this album is not the material, it's not the cover, it's not anything, it's not anybody's performance. What it is I gave the completed album to Neat Records, and then Neat Records, without telling me, went away and put it through to the pressing plant and took out a lot of bass from the bottom end and boosted the IQ on the top end, and this is not the way it should be. Since then, I've had my son, Alan, who's also the guitar player in Blitzkrieg these days. He ran this album through his computer and returned it back to the way it should be. We've never released it yet. I'm thinking of ways that I might be able to do that. But you'd finally be able to hear this album the way it was intended to be heard. As it stands, it's a bit limp, because the production lets it down massively, and that is not the way I had it in the studio. So hopefully at some time in the future we'll get that one reissued and back to the way it should be. This one, Absolute Power, is another fan favourite. This album is a very important album for me because it was the turning point. All of the problems that have sort of befell the band throughout the years, musicians come and go. The amount of different people that have gone through the ranks of Blitzkrieg is legendary, really. And people think, oh, you must be a really awful person to work for. If someone comes in, they do something wrong, you fire them, show them the door, off you go. It's not really like that. I kind of look at it from the point of view that when someone is no longer giving 100%, they know they're not giving 100%. I know they're not giving 100%. It's clear they don't want to be there. That's when I have the conversation with them. Do you really want to carry on with this? And they'll say themselves, well, actually, no, I've been thinking of quitting. So that's when that happens. It's also brought about what we lovingly call in Blitzkrieg, the curse of Blitzkrieg. Because on all of the albums that were recorded from 1981 right up to the present day, there are no two albums with exactly the same lineup on.
That could still change in years to come, though.
That could still come in years to come, and I'm hoping that that is the case with the next album. We're going to hopefully break the curse of Blitzkrieg. No one's going to leave. They've all been told, not one person is leaving this band. Do you understand, guys? And they say, yeah, we understand. But this album, this was this was the last album that Tony J. Little appeared on. Tony had problems, he is a very talented writer, and some of the riff work and stuff that he does has really helped cement Blitzkrieg as to be what the band that we are, really. And I couldn't have done it without him. He was such a great guy. He reached the point where, though, he reached that point we've just talked about. He came to me one day and said, my heart's not in this anymore, I need to go. And I said, okay, I'm not going to stop it.
That's how it is.
That's the way it is. My parting shot was, are you sure? And he said, yes, I'm sure. So we shook hands, and that was the end of that, really. It's sad that at a later date he then said that he felt that I'd let him down, and I didn't. That's a personal thing, though.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, the next album, Sins and Greed. This is the first time I have to say this is not my favourite cover. I mean, everything that we've done, similar, like Satan, that has the judge on everything.
There's a theme.
The Bird of Armageddon is on every Blitzkrieg cover. Sometimes he's not obvious, sometimes he is, but he's always there. And there he is on that one, there he is on that one, there he is on that one. The one that the people have problems finding him on is this one. But there he is, as a gargoyle on the top of the building. There he
Wow.
is.
There
So
you go.
he's there. So, you know, this, however, you know, at the time we wanted a sleeve and we needed it quickly, and the bass player that we had at the time, Paul Brewis, worked for Marshall at the time. And he said, oh, the CGI people at Marshall, we can, you know, we do all of the adverts for Marshall, amplification and everything. I'll get them to knock up a sleeve for Blitzkrieg. It'll be cool, it'll be great. And I said, well, what exactly were you thinking about? And I said, well, I wanted a picture of the world, but I wanted the bird sort of looking at, can you remember many years ago, I don't know if you're old enough to remember it, but you may have seen it, the Rick Wakeman album, No Earthly Connection.
Yes.
Where he's the world and he's leaning into it like that, and if you put a cylinder on it, it mirrors the picture and it shows you quite well. I didn't want to go quite that far, but I wanted the bird to be sort of looming over the top of the world as a threat. It kind of meant what it was supposed to be was the threat of nuclear war that we're all living with in every day of our lives. Not all of us want to think about it all the time, I certainly don't, but this is what it was about, and that's what sins and greed are. You know, the sin, the ultimate sin, is nuclear war. And it's brought about by what? It's brought about by greed. And that is the whole concept of the album. And this is what he came back with. A picture of the world with a superimposed bust, because I had a life-size bust of the bird's head made. And that's what he had put on.
Got it.
I think it's a very poor sleeve. I was never happy about it, but it was too late to do anything about it. It had to go to the pressing plant, otherwise we would have lost the release date. And you know, sometimes that's the way it is. However, it does have some great songs on it, and there's nothing wrong with the album itself. The album itself, I think, has got some great songs on there. So, different era. Tony was no longer there. You know, 2 new guitar players came in, and it was a new start, and not a bad start either. I think it's a great album, but it's you know, I think a lot of people accepted that album more than they did, say, the Mists of Avalon album. But you know, I mean, just going back to the Mists of Avalon just for a second, the amount of people that have said to me now, oh, we're just starting to get into the Mists of Avalon album, we're getting it now, you know. And so that's great, but I'm going to try and put that right at some point. I'm going to try and get that reissued. As I said, this one, if I was going to change anything about this album at all, it would be the sleeve. It would be the artwork. We have a similar problem later, but I'll get to that in a second. This one, again, this was done by the artwork was done by the people at Marshall. And after I'd given them a bit of a roasting over that one, they must have felt that they had to come up with something a little bit more special. So I sat with them and I told them what I wanted. And there we have it. A theatre with the bird overlooking the stage. All of these actors on the stage are ghosts. The people in the orchestra pit are ghosts. And any audience that you can see, I don't know if you can actually see it in this particular picture, because this picture was actually slightly bigger than this. And this is me as a ghoul, after I've entered the theatre of the damned, and I become one of these in the story, you know. So that depicts the subject matter of the song, Theatre of the Damned, and I'm actually quite pleased with that. Some people aren't. They think they think it's a little wrong, maybe. I don't know exactly why they think that, but the logo, I think, is probably the worst part of it. It was a situation where I said, do not change the logo, and they put a short sword, or like a Roman short sword, instead of a long Excalibur type sword. But you know, you can't have everything. But that's got some really strong songs on it, where I was able to do a lot of things. I actually I wrote most of these lyrics the night before I went into the studio to record them. I wrote about 4 or 5 of these. I had 4 or 5 songs left to write, and I sat in my kitchen and wrote the final 5 songs before I went to Germany to record the album, which was produced by Biff Byford from Saxon. with myself. So I think Theatre of the Damned is a great album, but it's going to be this is destined to be a lost album, I think, because this came out on Armageddon Records, which was the label attached to Wacken Festival in Germany, and it was disbanded. Well, about a year after the release of this album. They still have the rights to this album, so we can't get it to reissue it, which is an unfortunate thing because a lot of people say they haven't got that album.
It's very difficult one.
But we are, well, that's the reason why, and I'm working on to try and get back, because personally I would like to reissue every album if I can. And that, you know, that brings me to another point, to be fair, just briefly going back to A Time of Changes. So many people said to me, it's awful. I cannot get a copy of A Time of Changes. If you're lucky enough to find one, a collector will charge you over £3,000 for it. I mean, that is ridiculous. And I thought that was a sin of the highest magnitude. So what I did was, we went back into the studio and re-recorded this album with the lineup that was in the band at the time, which was the same lineup as this. And we put it out so that people didn't have to pay a ridiculous amount of money to get a copy of the album. Yeah, I accept it's not the original, which I know a lot of collectors want.
But it's
it's there. It's the next best thing. And but you know, we did that, and that was the reason for that. This one here, Back from Hell. So many people loved Unholy Trinity so much. They said, okay, you've named Jack the Ripper. Is there any chance you will ever write any more songs about Jack the Ripper? And my answer at the time was, well, not really, because Jack the Ripper only killed 5 women. And once he'd done, he was done. There's nothing else to say. And then I was sitting at home, and my wife said, well, why don't you write a song about Jack the Ripper? And say, just employ a little artistic license, if you like, and just say that the reason why the murders ceased in 1888 was because he found a time rift and came into the future.
And that's
into this album. So he's back from hell, Jack the Ripper. Okay, he's come back from hell. You know where whatever. He's come into the future. Whichever way you look at it. What would have happened if Jack the Ripper came to the present day? And that is what this album's about. Particularly the song Back from Hell. It just purports what happens. And in the opening bars of the song, he's walking down the street and you hear the footsteps. And you hear a lady stop him from walking by. And she said, I can't remember exactly what she says, but she engages in conversation with him. And he is a little confused, so he tells her, not now. She insists, she keeps going, and he's going, not now. And then the demon takes over, and he kills her on the spot. And that is the start again of Jack the Ripper in the present day. That's what the song's about. There's also, I mean, there's many other songs on there, different, it's different stuff, but the picture on the cover depicts what is actually going on in the song itself. So, and there it is, and there's the return back to the sword the way it should be. Also, there's the Tower of London, not the Tower, Big Ben, which is actually wrong, that's not Big Ben at all. It's the Tower of Westminster. Big Ben is the bell inside of it. And also on that album is a song which is turned into a massive Blitzkrieg fan favourite, a song called V. You may have seen the comic, V for Vendetta, the movie V for Vendetta. Correct. I saw that movie, I was blown away. I thought this is amazing. So we wrote the song about it, and at the end of the film, the Westminster Tower gets blown up, and that's what that is there. It's the depiction of that. There's little flavours of all the different songs in that sleeve. And, there we have it. You even have V there,
that's right.
The theatre mask, and Alice Cooper right there.
It's good connection.
Great connection.
And the last album
The last
Or
one.
the most current album?
This is the most current one, and again, I said earlier, you know, if I could do something about the sleeve on this album here, then
I could see the relation.
if I could ever do something about this, then we would. The reason for this, we put out a single with pretty much the same picture on it. We had the artist do the artwork, and it was the artist that did these covers, you know, the classic. He did the classic, this one, and he did the Unholy Trinity cover, and he also did, let's have a look, this one here as well. This one.
Yeah.
So, the classic artist that did those, I wanted him to come back, and we negotiated with him, and he came back. He's now a tattoo artist, so he doesn't do this kind of thing anymore. But we got him to do this for the single, which was released before the album. Then we had a disagreement, and he then said, I don't want it released, and we said, it's already been released, we can't stop it. It's gone to the pressing plant, the album has been released, and he said, well, I want you to recall all of the albums. I said, look, dude, honestly, you cannot do that. You know, it's financially not possible, it cannot be done. So then he refused to do the sleeve for the album, so we were forced to use the same picture. The idea that I had originally for this album was, if you had the Satan album and you put this side by side, it would complete a picture. So you would have the bird on the floor with his wings down, the armour has been removed and he's chained to the floor. And of course you have the judge on the other sleeve looking at him, you know. It was not to be, because that's what came out. Having said that though, again, similarly to that, I don't have a problem at all with the concept, the actual album itself. It's a great album. The guys worked really hard on it. We wanted to make an album that would stand out, and I think we've done that. So, and it's still true to the original Blitzkrieg idea, as all of these are, really. So, throughout the years, I think we've put together some very interesting concepts. I don't write throwaway lyrics, never have. Maybe occasionally I might do one, but you know, I mean, Buried Alive was supposed to be just that, to be fair. A huge influence on my life was Mark Bolan, and Mark Bolan wrote songs like Get It On or Metal Guru, which didn't really make an awful lot of sense unless you knew what he was talking about. And so what I did, I wrote a song called Buried Alive, which was Blitzkrieg's first single, and it was supposed to be a nonsense song. But after I'd written it, I realised it wasn't a nonsense song at all. It's actually quite deep and it means something. But I leave that for other people to work it out. But generally, I like to write a story. I write a lyric that means something. It's not just about a fast car or some lady with very large attributes or blonde hair or whatever. It's about something. Every song there's a story going on. And we do that with Satan and with Blitzkrieg. Different subject matter, obviously, to keep the things separate. But and we want to continue that on into the next album.
What are the chances of seeing Blitzkrieg in the United States?
At this moment in time, very good. At the moment while I'm here, the band's agent are negotiating with some people in the States for a tour next year. We're looking to try and do that sometime in maybe March or April. So, I would say that's very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.